And this month's topic is derived products. So Kyle will take us through some examples of how to create those products and how they can be a tremendous time saver in managing and setting up products that are very similar to one another that just have some variations, and also going through how you can create a derived product from a line item on an order. So we'll let Kyle run through the training, and if you have questions as we're going through, please add those to the chat box, and we can field those after Kyle's discussion, and we'll kind of keep managing those as we're going through. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Kyle.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, so basically what we're talking about today is what's called derived products, and it's a new feature. I believe it came out with 5.7, but basically it's a way to kind of make a template without having to make a brand new product. So if you do, if you do a certain type of banner all the time, or you do a certain type of yard sign all the time, you have all the same selections and you sell it multiple times, rather than having to keep recreating that quote or keep finding jobs that you clone all the time, you can straight up just make that a new product without having to make a new product. And that'll become apparent when we start talking about it. Basically, there's two ways to create derived products. I'm going to show you the complicated way first just to see what all goes into it. And then we'll go through the easy method that will make you really appreciate how much that does for you when you use that other option. So, all right. So pretty much most of the derived product stuff is set up if you just go to Setup, Pricing Setup, All Pricing Setup. You do your derived products the same way that you would do just about any other product in the system. So you have your product list here. It has all your regular products. So you have to kind of pick what you'd like to make your derived product from. So because these basically derived products are based off of existing products. So if I wanted to make a banner, I would do a wide format print. If I wanted to do a flatbed print, I would start off with that. So you have to find kind of like your starting product first. So we're going to go here and say digital print, and then wide format print. So when you select that print, that is your regular product. Then from here, what you can do is if you go and say add, you can say a number of different options here. So with this selected, you can add a new derived product, but you have to have your item selected. So like if I had the category selected, obviously the derived product is going to be grayed out because I can't do a derived product from a category. So we'll say wide format print, add, and then new derived product. So from here, it opens up your new product. It'll give you, let you name it like you would anything else. Store opening banner, and then from here you kind of start seeing your base product is your wide format print. So that tells you what the basis is. And the reason why the basis is so important is, and one of the main features about the derived products is, if you have to make formula changes, if you make it on the parent product, all those changes apply to all your derived products. So that's why these things are really useful, is because if you wanted to change up the way that the printing works or add a slight change, and you have a bunch of derived products, you only have to make your change once. So any formula updates, anything that you do to fix things that are applied to the parent product are also applied to all of the child item or all of your derived items changes as well. And that's why these are really cool, is because you don't have to do as many overall changes. These are mostly just set to set different values of defaults. Okay, and then basically then you got your category, which is just the folder that it's going to appear in, and then if you wanted to put specific notes for that particular product. So overall, what you're really doing with these derived products is just saying, picking the different variables and picking the default values. So if I wanted to do a store opening banner, I can go and say large format printers, add it, and then select the default value to use for that particular printer. And this is where a lot of it, if you don't know the background structure, the other method will be a lot more usable for you. This is just kind of showing you how the back end works. So you select the different variables and you select the value that you're going to want that variable to be. So large format printers defaults to the Milwaukee. And I go here and then we'll say image height. And we want, let's say, we're going to do a 36 and image width by 120. And we just go down the listing of variables for the things that you want to default. And if you don't default something, then it just works the same way that the parent item does. So you're only specifying certain values to override. The rest of the calculations would still happen normally based off of the parent item's calculations. So just to kind of finish this up, we'll do material type and material, and then we'll take a look at what this does. So we'll say banner material, and then roll stock underscore material. And that. Okay, so that you're setting a product that has specific defaults. Like you can normally do this on a regular product, but this way you don't have to have lots of regular product clones. You can have a derived product clone, so that way you don't have to make multiple changes a lot of times for updating your other formulas. And then, so that's the variables. Modifiers would work the same way. If you have a default modifier values, you could set it in the same way. If I wanted the default this to always be a rush job, I could set that as a default and do it that way. So modifiers work the same way as the variables in terms of specifying your default values. Then you get to the advanced, and you can change values here. They don't have to. Most people really don't, but you could go here and tell it to use a different pricing form. You can tell it to be a different income account. You can set different default stations, but for the most part, most of the other values are going to be the same. So what we'll do now is we have enough to go ahead and save this. So you'll see it saves it as a regular product on your list like it would normally, and then there is a little icon here actually that you can see that has a little D in the bottom right of the icon, just to let us know that this is a derived item. So then if I go and do a new job and you select digital prints, you see your wide format print and our store opening banner. So if I add the store opening banner, it adds in the wide format print with those default values that we had selected, and then the usage and all the rest of the calculations are done normally. So you can use this to set up multiple different items that you quote all the time without having to go through and re-quote them or trying to find the job that you cloned once before. You can just set it up as a regular item that you can add to your menu, and it's just the wide format print with different defaults. So it doesn't have to do. It makes it much easier on you because you don't have to update as much or do housekeeping on as many items, because it still is in essence a wide format print. So that is kind of the basics of what a derived item is and how you can set one up from scratch. Now obviously a lot of people probably don't know the variable structure in the background and wouldn't have access to that information. So there is a much easier way to create a derived item. And that is, you just go ahead and say, you do your main item, so I want to do a wide format print, and we'll say we want this one to be we'll do a yard sign, so we'll do 18, oops, not sure where that came from, 18 by 24. On Memaki, we'll print this onto vinyl. We will go ahead down here and say we're going to mount that one to Coro. And let's go ahead and throw a laminate on there as well. So you just do your quote like you would normally. You don't have to do anything special. And then once you have your information for your item set up the way that you want, if you take a look here in the top bar, there's actually a set of different buttons and different items here across the very top. So the very last button here says Save as New Derived Product. So once you have your item quoted, you can say Save as New Derived Product. It's just going to tell you all the overridden values can be saved as a derived item. Quickly add it. Basically just give you an explanation of what we're doing. And we give it a new name. So we're going to call this one just yard signs. Okay, do that and click OK. And now you can see it's added a new yard sign item to there. So if I double click on that yard sign, it pulls up 18 by 24, Memaki, vinyl, Orajet cold lamb, and Coroplast, all from the defaults. If we go back to the product setup where we set up our last product, it's added that yard sign, and all it really did for us is the exact same thing that we did, where we went through and selected the different values that we wanted to set, and it just defaulted those values for us without having to go in and kind of add them in manually. So it's the same exact process, but you don't have to know the different variables. It just knows that if you overrode something, it will pick up and use those values for you. So that, in essence, is pretty much the main thing that you can do with derived items. Now, I want to test out one thing here real quick. There's an option on there that you have this pick from derived products. The way that I believe this works is if we have this option selected, when you go to add in your parent item, it'll give you a listing of all the derived items. So if you pick the parent item and tell it to pick from derived items, it will give you access to all of your derived items that you've created from that parent item. So that way, if you didn't want to pull up the parent anymore, and you just wanted access to only the derived items, you can basically make all of your pre-built items and then only have access to those by using that option to pick from the derived items on the parent product level. So one thing I'm sure that's going to come up on the question, so I'll go ahead and answer this now, is unfortunately with the derived items, you're setting hard set values. So you cannot do formulas with these different items. So if I tell it the image height, I'm telling it 18 by 24. I can't really say under this condition do 18, under this condition do 36, under this condition. So there isn't any formulas that go with the derived items. You're just saying set it to be this value. So that's kind of the main thing that works with those derived items. So I got a question. Okay, so that's pretty much the main aspects of the derived items, how they're used, how to set them up, and kind of what their benefits are. So I'll go ahead and try to answer a couple of questions that have come through. So we'll go ahead and ask that. So the first question is kind of saying, when we started with control, caution not to do a lot of different products because it could affect the performance of the system. Is that not a concern? So derived items are, since they're kind of their own item, they're actually stored in a different table in the system. So they actually, database-wise, so this is getting a little bit of database discussion, but basically in the back end there's a table for customer goods item. And what they did now is they kind of split this up into separate values. So you have a product table and you have a derived product table. So creating multiple different derived products really isn't going to be a big effect on the system because it's not creating different variables like it does for every product. It's only creating the entries for the overridden values that you do on that particular item. So it's not quite as system taxing as doing a brand new product. So that stipulation where we mentioned, we recommended not doing a lot of products, really the main issue for that is resolved with the derived item because A, like I said, it doesn't take up as much space, and B, you don't have to fix a lot of formulas. So the biggest issue with cloning and making a lot of products in the past was, if let's say I wanted to make a change to my print time calculation. If I had cloned my wide format print and made 5 or 6 different products, I would have to go and update all 5 or 6 of those if I wanted to fix my print time calculation. Whereas with the derived item, I just fix my print time on my wide format print, and my derived items all pick up that change. So those are the two biggest pluses of the derived items that are better than just cloning the item and setting the defaults yourself. That's what makes this really good. Okay, second question is, what if you need to make a change to a derived item? So I might need you to clarify that a little bit because basically you can change the defaults on the derived item just by going to the derived product here and changing the values. Or if the other half of the question that I'm expecting is, if you add in the derived item, you're not locked into anything. The derived is just a default. If I wanted to go pull up a yard sign, and let's say the customer wanted it to do, they wanted a different lamb to go with it. You just pull up your derived item, and within the item, okay, I only have one lamb in it, so we'll say thermal lamb, and we'll use that lamb instead. So you can make changes within the job. Now it's not going to save it over the derived item unless I go to the base derived item to change it, but you're not locked into these values that you set up on your derived products. You can still change them after you've added them to your job, so you don't have to default everything. So the next question is, can you set up a derived product with child line items? I'll try to answer it. You might have to clarify it a little bit, but basically a derived item you cannot make an assembly unless its parent item is an assembly. Now you should be able to make a derived item a child item. So I should take this yard sign and demote it under the parent item that it goes with, and it should work perfectly fine. So I don't know of any issues of making a derived product a child item. However, like I said, you can't do an assembly out of a derived item unless its parent item is an assembly. Okay. Someone was asking me if I can go kind of review the item that we talked about the option for pick from derived product. So let me go ahead and I'm just going to clean up the mess here. Start a new quote. Okay. So back under the setup, pricing setup, all pricing setup, if you pick your parent product, so you're not going to have this option on the derived items, you want to go to the parent of these items. So on the wide format print, on your list of options on the product tab of that product, there's a lot of different checkboxes. And the very last checkbox there says pick from derived products. So when that option is added, if you go in and try to add your parent item on the quote, instead of pulling up the wide format print like it does normally, it'll pull up a listing of all the derived products that you've created from that product instead of pulling up the product itself. So that way you can make a bunch of derived items, and then that way you kind of have your team have them select from that list of items instead of having to select the original and start from scratch. So that way you can kind of build your own item list, turn this option on, and then then have your team have their preloaded list of items and not have to start one from scratch if you set up all the derived items that you want. So that's what that option was talking about, is kind of making it so when you add the parent item, it actually pulls in all the derived items instead of the parent item itself. So that's what that option lets you do. Just turn it back off. Okay. Does anyone else have any other questions about the derived items? Okay, but yeah, so the main thing is, like I kind of wanted to say at the beginning of the call, there's not a whole lot of depth into the derived products, but the stuff that it lets you do is really, really useful, because like I said, you can kind of build a product list of all your major items without having to make tons of clones of your parent items and make a lot of different items. That's kind of the biggest benefit of the derived items, is you just have your entire list of products without having to have like a different back-end product that goes with each one. So it just lets you do all of your main defaults, all of your main kind of we do this all the time types of jobs without really negatively affecting the system at all, like having to make tons and tons of parent items. This alleviates that issue. And then, like, the derived item doesn't have to stay in the same category. So now that we've made that yard sign, I could go and edit this, and I can move that into miscellaneous and just moves that parent item or that derived item into a different category. It doesn't behave any differently, but it's in a different section. I think, so the next question is, when you have that pick from derived box check, can you still pick the parent product? And I don't believe that is the case. That's kind of the purpose of that option, is to make sure that when you have that checked, you can only pick from the derived products. That was the entire intent behind that option. So when I select that, I can no longer select that wide format print normally. Now you could make a derived product of the wide format print that has no defaults if you still wanted to have that behavior. Is pretty much one solution that you could do. You would just have to have a slightly different name, but that's kind of the intent behind that button, is your team can no longer select the bare product. They have to select one of the derived items. Okay, any other questions? One thing I didn't mention, I will mention real quick, and I see the next question. Derived items, since they are just templates, they are actually one of the few things in the system that you actually can delete. So like right now, if I go to this job and I'll add in a couple of derived items. Okay, so if I go in and say, okay, you know what, we stopped doing this actually I'm going to get rid of the yard sign. We stopped doing yard signs like this. We do them differently now. I can actually go in and delete that template. It's going to say, do you wish to delete this derived product? Any orders with this derived product will be intact, but will be converted back to their base product. So if I tell it to delete this derived item template, go back to that estimate, the item will still exist, but it's going to be using the wide format print job instead. So it's one of the few things that you actually can delete from the system, and it will just revert it back to the base item instead of causing issues. So if you create a derived product and you want to remove it, you can actually completely remove that derived item if you don't need it anymore. Okay, so someone is asking, can you create a separate assembly product and include derived products as a part of that container? And the answer is yes. So if I went back to here and I had, let's say I had a sign package that was both, that contained a yard sign, a banner, and some, design or something like that. So I have a package that is multiple different derived items. I could go and say add a new top-level product, which is the original product. And when you say is an assembly, when you set up your assembly, you can add in any different items that you want. So I can add in store opening banner. I can add in, I'm sure I had another derived one. I don't know what category it was stuck in, but it's here somewhere. But yeah, so you can add in however many different products you want. So I'm going to add in, this is going to come with a design, and this is going to come with a installation. So derived items can be part of an assembly on their own. So that way you can build a bunch of different derived items, and if you sell those derived items as a set, you can then make another product that is a assembly and assign basically those multiple different derived items to kind of make a pre-packaged item set is one of the benefits you could do with this, that has all these items that are pre-built. You add this signed product that is all these derived items, and there is your sign set. Slightly different question, but I will go ahead and cover it. I'm not 100% sure if there's a video specifically on assemblies. I'd have to look and see. If anything, it might just be a quick wiki article to write up, because it's just a checkbox option that gives you one new tab. So it's not. I don't think an entire video on assemblies could be done. Any other questions about the derived items? Okay, so yeah, so as was mentioned, the derived items, they're really easy to set up, especially if you use if you do the quote yourself and then just use that create derived item from that. That's the easiest way to go about doing it for sure. Someone did ask a question. You noticed when a derived product is created that a part adjustments do not stay. Yeah, like overridden parts won't stick, because those, you're not overriding formulas there. You're just overriding usage of a part. And those types of things, those are part of the transpart values and not part of the product. So if you try to, essentially if you go into the item and go in and say, this is actually 0.25, this is 0.25. Like if you try to override values like that, those values do not get set over to a derived item because you're overriding it on the individual line. So those types of things do not get counted as part of the derived item creation, since you're just setting variables. Do we have any other derived product questions? Yeah, it's definitely recommended that you guys get in there and play around with it. Since all you're setting up is a template, there's not a whole lot that you can really break. The worst thing you can break with a derived item is your item doesn't work. But you're not going to break the parent product because it's just a template of the parent. So it is one of those things that you can get in there and mess around with it a little bit. And yeah, I know. Someone said famous last words. Yeah, you still want to be careful, but there's less there's less room for issues with this than some of the other items that we've covered. So it is recommended that, if you get in there, you want to create a derived item, you can create that one, and then if it doesn't work, then you can remove that derived item. So it's one of these few things you can add, and if it doesn't work out, you can remove that derived item and then just try again. Since all you're setting up is a template and nothing more. So, all right, Kristen, I think that's it for the derived items. I haven't seen any other questions come through.
You're right, I don't see any others, so we'll go ahead and wrap up there, and tomorrow we'll continue with our regularly scheduled consulting webinars, and thank you everyone for attending.